Hello, hi, it's been a minute since we've done this whole thing. Hello? It's been since May, since the last time I told you what I read recently, what I liked, all that fun stuff. So we kind of have to do like a little cheeky little 6-month wrap up. Are you ready? Some of them I might not even remember how I feel. Also, I look busted. I'm sorry. I look busted, tired, I'm exhausted, but I want to get this out there. And I can't figure out how to do this lighting. We're going in the order of which I read things because that's the easiest thing for me to do right now. First thing I could have sworn I've talked about before. But that book is Mrs. Sherlock Holmes by Ricka. I ended up giving this 3.5 out of 5 stars. It was a cool concept, but I feel like the blurb of the book was very, very misleading. It kind of chronicles this lawyer in the early 1900s, I think like 1920s, yeah, around that time period. And she is first like an immigration lawyer, and she helps out with people in New York who are immigrants. And it's very interesting, but then we jump forward and back to her life, but then also this like cold case of this missing girl and kind of how she comes to get to this cold case and what she does with it. It's all about Grace Humiston and her life, and it was very, very interesting. And then she ended up going into the details of kind of doing investigative work into what were like modern day like slave camps. Interesting, and not something I knew anything about. They would have, I think specifically a lot of like Italian immigrants would come in, they would bus these immigrants in, and then they would basically have them working for nothing at all. And then where they would be living and working on these like farms and stuff, everything would be astronomically expensive to the point where all of these people would be working only to be like further in debt to the people selling them these goods and who they're also working for. It was a really messed up concept. The story definitely stuck with me, but that being said, I didn't think it was told in the best way possible. I think it definitely got confusing at times. But that being said, I thought she was a very interesting woman and did lots of good things in her life, obviously. The next book that I read was Under the Knife, A History of Surgery and 28 Remarkable Operations by Arnold Vandalar. I ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars. Certain parts of this book, being a book I would go back and read, I give it 3 out of 5 stars. I thought it was okay. Some of it was very fascinating, and I was really interested in learning about the history of certain surgeries. But then other parts were just boring, and like, I'm not a surgeon, so I don't care. I feel like it wasn't an easy book to read if you don't know anything about surgery. The book I really liked was Smoke Gets in Your Eyes and Other Lessons from the Crematory by Doughty. This was my first time reading anything by her, and wow, I love this. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. This was fascinating. This was all about Caitlin and when she used to work in a funeral home and what that was like. And this one, I ended up reading another book by her. This one was more about her and this specific crematory, and it was really good, really fascinating, really interesting. Something I find very interesting, and definitely a job that it's kind of amazing that people have the ability to have that job. She's hilarious. I think she's a really, really funny person to read from. I would highly recommend it if you're into nonfiction, and if you're into nonfiction that isn't too heavy and isn't too based on you having to learn information. It was like kind of part giving you information, but also kind of part memoir. The next book is so good. And that was The Stranger in the Woods, The Extraordinary Story of the Last True Hermit by Finkel. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I loved this. This was fascinating. This was all about a man who up and decided one day he was going to be a hermit. And the ways that they ended up getting him, if you will. I think I left it not really understanding why he did any of it. Yeah, I don't get it, but also fascinating. I would really recommend this if you're into psychological element of people, into knowing kind of people's thoughts and feelings and why they do what they do and what goes into it and all that stuff. I really like hearing about the choices that people make. I think that's so fascinating. The next book, can you tell I really liked nonfiction this year? I really took nonfiction to heart this year. The next book is The Ice Pick Surgeon: Murder, Fraud, Sabotage, Piracy, and Other Dastardly Deeds Perpetuated in the Name of Science by Sam Keane. I gave this 4.75 stars. I really liked this. This very much gave me, what was that book called by Eleanor Herman? I'm gonna put it up on the screen, but this was a great book, and it reminded me a lot of this, where it was kind of nasty and grotesque in its descriptions of things. Definitely not for the faint of heart. Definitely not for people who get grossed out easily. One of the most interesting things was I didn't know we knew about hypothermia from Nazi Germany. Huh? Like what? Like that was very interesting. I think it was very interesting hearing about the different ways that we came to know things based on people doing awful things to people. Not for the faint of heart. Definitely probably the most intense book I read on this list. It was intense, but it was also good. So I liked it. Next book is Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs? Big Questions from Tiny Mortals About Death by Caitlin Doughty. Hopefully I'm saying her name right. Bro, I don't know. I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. I really like this one as well. This one was more Caitlin answering very specific questions that people have about death. And it was very, very interesting. And it's definitely a book I'm going to reread for informational purposes, just to kind of know things. It was a nonfiction that was meant to tell you facts about things, but it was done in a funny way. And I really appreciate nonfiction that does that, that kind of tells me really grim information, but in a lighthearted tone. And Caitlin really does that really well. She manages to talk about literally the darkest thing ever, which is death, and make it not as negative as you would think it would be. She's a very death positive person. She's very into trying to change the whole idea and conversation around death and kind of make people more involved in it and make it not as much of a taboo subject. Hearing people talk about it. So therefore, if you're looking for definitely more of a viewpoint on that opinion that people hold of like being death positive and all that stuff, I do recommend her books because she talks about that a lot. This book that I read, I might actually have a little physical copy of it. I've been doing really bad British accents lately. I don't know what that is. It's like a joke, but it's not funny. The book that I read is The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl Volume 10. Life is Too Short, Squirrel. And I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I love Squirrel Girl. She's so funny and just so lighthearted and really makes my soul feel lighter. I really feel like a weight is lifted every time I read Squirrel Girl. And it had been a while since I had read one. So, yeah, I just love it. And I always think the villains are very interesting in the Marvel universe, and specifically the ones that Squirrel Girl deals with. I think they're always quirky and fun and crazy. The last book that I will be talking about is another book that I really enjoyed. Here's the thing. I have been enjoying just about all of the things that I've been reading this year, which is great. And that is... and that is The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. I ended up giving this 4.75 stars. I really like this, but again, not for the faint of heart. I repeat, not for the faint of heart. It's a horror book. Don't get it twisted. Don't think that this is like a thriller. No, it's a horror book. It's very gross and detailed, so not for the faint of heart. Definitely also has trigger warnings for, I'm sorry if any of the other books that I read had trigger warnings for anything. I don't remember, it's been too long. But this one definitely had trigger warnings for like suicidal thoughts, suicide itself, and also like anxiety, panic attacks, PTSD. Can't remember the last time that I picked up a book that I literally could not put down. I actually physically exclusively read this, which I haven't done in a really long time. I exclusively read this in this physical copy and I could not put it down. I spent my entire life thinking about this book for days. Like, I could only read this book for days. That's all I could do. I could only read this book. And it definitely, as it got on, it got way more intense than I thought it would be. At first I was like, oh, this is just gonna go into like the psychological element of like these final girls. But no, No. It's an interesting concept, and it's very hard to explain. But basically, the final girls that were in horror movies in the 80s/90s, story kind of takes it and makes it that these final girls are real, that those movies were based on these girls' real life stories. Like, it's a very interesting concept, and they're in this support group, and one of them goes missing, and it had me on the edge of my seat. And honestly, towards the end, I think the reason I didn't give a full 5 stars was because it kind of got annoying with how much it was flipping back and forth as to kind of like what the protagonist was thinking and where the protagonist thought this was going. It was like they were changing their mind literally every 5 seconds, and it was pissing me off. Like at the end, in the last like 100 pages, like it's like whiplash every time we're trying to figure out what the heck's going on. I'm like, okay, can we just like breathe for a second and maybe think about this a little bit more? But also at the same time, that's just kind of how like those classic horror movies in the 80s and 90s went, was it was like, what's going on? Is it this person? Is it this person? Is it this person? Is it this? Like, it was just all over the place and accusing everybody of everything. And that's very much like this. Like, if you like those movies, you'll probably like this. Everybody's annoying. Everybody's flawed. Everybody's problematic. But I really, really liked it. And the very last book I will be talking about is Letter to a Young Female Physician, Notes from a Medical Life by Suzanne Coven. 5 out of 5 stars. I will be thinking about this book for the rest of my life, probably. This is a memoir about exactly what it says, about a female physician, and it kind of chronicles her life from what it was like being a child, being the child of a physician, and then growing up to be a physician and a primary doctor, what it was like to be a female in that field and go through medical school, and then to kind of be a practicing doctor. And it was very interesting to see her opinions of her own health and how that translated into how she then viewed patients. It was very interesting, and I did like it because I feel like she was very willing to call herself out on her bullcrap, and I really liked that. And I feel like she was very willing to own up to when she maybe had a wrong opinion, or maybe something wasn't a great take, but then she informed herself, she educated herself, and as things changed, she kind of got better with it. And I didn't read this quickly. And I never do this, ever. I'm a read it fast and then finish it type of person usually. But this book, I just read, like, I listened to a chapter, because she actually narrates it. I listened to a chapter, like, every night. Like, I listened to a chapter before bed, and it was so relaxing. It wasn't gross. It wasn't icky. It was just so good. And it was, like, I could just casually listen to it before bed, and it would, like, help calm me down, and I wasn't stressed out reading it. Very different experience from reading this. I read this, and then, funnily enough, I finished this, obviously. So, yeah, I just really loved it. I thought it was great. So those are all the books that I have read recently. That was June through November. Let me know if you read any of these books down below. I would love to know. I'm trying. I'm out here, people. I'm trying. I'm grinding. And by grinding, I mean not grinding at all. Let me know what you read recently. Let me know what you loved recently. I would love to know. I don't know what anybody's reading. I haven't watched BookTube in like 6 months, so I don't know what anybody's reading. I don't know what the anything is. I don't know what people are doing at all. Ooh. Yeah. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope I'll see you in the next one that isn't 6 months from now. Bye.